Coming to healthcare. Thank you, everybody. This is my first AJ Bell event, and I'm thrilled to be here. We are a US-based company in our operations, so I was very pleased that I could actually be here in person. It was very good timing, so hello to you all. We're going to present, in terms of healthcare, a company that's at a different inflection point where much of the product development has already been achieved, and we're now really talking about expansion in our commercial phase, and that hence you can see from research to revenues. So who are we? We are a kidney transplant diagnostic company that uses RNA signatures. Don't worry, I'll unpack that statement. So let's start with the kidney transplant field as an area and take a step back. Let's start with the immune system. As we all know, the immune system is normally your best friend. But obviously, when you get to a point where you've got a transplant, an alien organ within your body, the immune system can turn into your worst nightmare. For the clinician that are dealing with this, and we'll start with kidney, but this is a comment that applies across organs for transplant, is the issue is how to manage the immune system or the body's response to an alien organ, hence the transplanted organ. And they are faced with what we call the therapeutic dilemma. The way that they manage it is post-transplant is that they will administer a drug regime from the immunosuppression regime, and that is a very large protocol. What that does is that suspends your immune system, and then gradually, as they reduce that protocol or the dosing levels, it will get down to a point where the body now accepts and recognizes the new organ as part of the body and not something to attack. So that's the pressure. The difficulty they have is if they do too much, or they open up each patient to underlying diseases, progression of cancer. It's a real problem in terms of the other disease states that the patient may be facing. If they give too little, they leave the graft. So there is this sort of balancing act, and that's really the dilemma. And they're looking for information in terms of being able to manage that patient care pathway. If we look at the current practice, if you think about it pre-transplant, the information that they've got is really very general. It's very broad clinical features that have been assessed as little better than the flip of a coin. So for them, when you talk in clinical practice, it is the lack of information that they have there. And it has led to what is called a one-size-fits-all therapy. They give a large dose of the immunosuppression, and then they taper off, see how it does. If there's injury, they bring up the dosing. If they don't, then they continue that reduction. So one size fits all, as you can imagine, and looking around the room, you recognize we're all individuals. One size fits all in healthcare very rarely works. Post-transplant, there are some current tests that are being available, and they rely on a technology called cell-free DNA. What is that? It's what we might call a late biomarker. It effectively measures what I would call the debris in the blood post-injury. And so as you can understand, that would be the clinician reacting to damage being rather than being ahead of the story. So as you can see, a number of issues there. And what did I mean by RNA signature? RNA is about basically the instruction, the information highway of the body. And if you think about it, when we have the ability to capture all of the messages from a simple blood draw. All of those messages can be very pertinent to the clinical dilemma, or it can be as benign as grow a toenail, feel hungry, so on and so forth. So there's an awful lot of noise, and as you can imagine, that leads to a lot of data. Once you've done the entire transcriptome, you've covered 30,000 genes, and when you're looking at their expression, their dynamic patterns, what they're trying to tell the clinician, and you can see there's a lot of data. An RNA signature, in quite simple terms, is the answer to a clinical question. What do I mean by that? We have 3 products, and I'll show you how they fit into the transplant arena. But essentially, the first product in the pre-transplant asks a very specific question. How aggressive or benign is my patient likely to be in the face of a graft? If they're going to be a high reactor, they're going to be high risk. If they're going to be a low reactor and fairly benign, it's going to be low risk. That's incredibly important to be, ahead of the story, ahead of the treatment protocol, and being able to be ahead of the story. So very proactive story there. Tutivia, just post-transplant, how's the organ doing? The clinical question there is, how likely is it that this patient is having a rejection event that the clinician needs to intervene? So it's not about just, is there an event going on? The body is, in most part, able to deal with a certain amount. The clinician wants to know, when do I have to intervene? Where's my call to action? Is it worth me increasing the dose? These are big, heavy drugs. I want to make sure it's worthwhile. And so it's a very important answer to that question. And then latterly, we have Protega. That's for long-term outcomes. So long-term, how likely is it that the patient is facing some of the long-term issues? Fibrosis is the obvious one. There are other factors in long-term outcomes. But essentially what you're looking for, again, is I'm now looking at the risk of long-term care and how I modulate the pathway for those risk factors. This is what I call the vision slide. It's always helpful to understand where are 3 products sitting within the continuum and the vision for the company. You can see where we talked about that pre-transplant, early stage and late stage. As one might imagine, that's kind of the start of end-to-end testing. You've got the whole continuum of the transplant journey being covered by 3 individual tests. And we always said we will launch as 3 individual tests. But they're all based on the same underlying platform, RNA signatures, and that has lent itself to the idea that there is, and the early data has supported this, that each test will inform one another. So you can take 3 individual tests and then present this really as an end-to-end solution, and this becomes kind of more of a platform technology in healthcare terms. We've always said if you look at that's kidney transplant. Clearly this is applicable to other organs. Transplant is usually covers the major organs are heart, kidney is the major one, but lung and liver are the other main categories there. The approach of using genetic information like this in terms of the expression, the RNA signatures, is also widely applicable to other disease groups. And in the long-term future, we would see this being able to be applied to adjacent disease groups like autoimmune. It makes an awful lot of sense if you're getting information about the immune system and the responses for treatment protocols, that this would be an obvious area to go. And then behind that, you see, I don't know whether you can see it very well, but there is this sort of fluffy cloud idea, the universal symbol for data. And that is because we're not just a physical testing company, we're also a data. We take the entire transcriptome, that's an awful lot of data, and that can be interrogated over and over again. Think about it. When I say that RNA signatures are answer to a clinical question, if you have alternative questions, you can go back to the data and ask a slightly different one. This lends itself very well to collaborations. There's always a crossover between diagnostic companies and pharmaceutical development. This is an ideal part for collaboration. So if we looked at that, we've always talked about that as being the research asset. It's not brilliant branding. We've always said we'll come back and have another look at that. But essentially, this is an idea that healthcare has moved from just pure physical samples and testing into an environment where data becomes a very valuable asset. This is our inflection point. One of the things that I've presented many times to investors over the last few years, just to reassure people that our milestones that we're clicking off on the delivery are all within a vision that they are very familiar with. But it's time to rephrase that vision, because it's very product development focused, and we are now at the point of revenues. And it's now nice to be able to say, okay, let's reshape those products and understand how they translate in the commercial environment into revenue centers. So let me walk through that. You can see that the core products are up the top there. For anybody that followed the story to date, obviously you'll know that we've got 2 of those products through the product development, the clinical validation, out to being used in the clinics themselves. So we first announced Tutivia, and that is the middle one. And then last year, at the back end, anyone noted that there was a collaboration, a licensing deal with Thermo Fisher. Thermo Fisher is a very large diagnostic and scientific company within the environment, a little bit of the David and the Goliath aspect to that kind of deal. But we were very pleased to be able to offer that as an offering in the pre-transplant space. They bought a company some time ago, very heavily involved in the pre-transplant space, and this was adding a novel product to their portfolio, and something we were very pleased to be able to do. I think it added a lot of credibility to a company of that size and who are quite serious in their diligence for medical products to be able to very quickly show that licensing deal. So that was at the back end of last year. Tutivia is something that we've been offered with through our own sales force, something we're building up. And to me, when I start thinking about revenues, I always think in a kind of picture. Licensing revenues for me are a bit big, lumpy, upfront milestone payments, and then a tail at the end. Obviously, the tail is royalties, but that it doesn't have a cost base. When you think about direct revenues, it's the inverse. You start off and you're looking at that hockey stick of growth. You're looking at, in the beginning, low revenues with the inflection point, and then the increase in revenues much more on the back end. But of course, that comes with a P&L aspect to it on the cost base. So higher top number, but costs associated with that. We have this category called to be determined. I think I'm going to trademark that as a business line. One thing I'd like to say is that is not about uncertainty. That's about choice. One of the things that we were quite clear about was this third product. There was a high degree of interest. It's also an incredibly unique part of the testing continuum. There is no other product like it. And certainly Thermo Fisher were quite vocal about their interest in also having a licensing deal there. Why do I call it to be determined? Because I never want to undervalue my assets on that kind of licensing deal by making someone too comfortable. The way you do that is obviously in 2 ways: competitive tension, and the old tricks of being publicly seen talking to your competitors. They're old hat, but they still work. I think all the players in this field understand that there is a competitive element to that deal. The second one is obviously always being able to walk away by saying we can have a direct sales force, we can offer it ourselves. And so that is representing choice. And as you see, when we look at the pipeline of products that are coming through in other programs, you'll see that underneath. That would also fall into the same sort of idea that we have a choice in terms of the way that we manifest those into revenue centers. Remember the cloud? Remember that data? It's now developing into its own business line. And we're calling that the services business. This is not unusual for testing companies who have capacity within their labs. And we have the ability to offer out, in terms of collaborations, different types of services and therefore revenue centers. It goes all the way from the fact that we had physical assets. In our clinical trial, we collected samples both in blood, tissue and urine, very well curated, longitudinal, an incredibly valuable asset in medical terms. And that we showed that we could monetize it. It was also announced that Thermo had taken as part of the overall contract, they had taken part of those samples to use in their own testing. That is something that we had envisaged, and it was nice to demonstrate the monetization of that asset. But it doesn't stop there. There's another tangible asset, which is once we've distilled it and we've run our own aliquots of those samples, we have data that enables us in a very tangible way to do collaborations with other partners. That obviously comes with its either fee for service or collaboration type of structure in the deal. But then there's the third element of it, which is what I might call the skill set of the team, the expertise. It's more intangible. It's nevertheless very valuable. Being able to offer this kind of technology, it is a very new wave in medical care. Not many companies have successfully been able to present this in a clinic all the way from the academic bench right the way into clinical practice. We've done it twice. That comes with a certain amount of credibility, and with the increasing demands on the environment in the regulatory area and in reimbursement complexity. One of the things that we're recognizing, and we're getting inbound inquiries, is about partnership in that kind of whole product development continuum in our sweet spot and our expertise. So for us, that's the kind of third revenue area. Just for anyone that's been following the story, let me just give a quick update. We announced that collaboration. There's always a natural amount of skepticism with a large company doing a deal with a small company. Will they sign it? Will they tie you up? And will they then put a 2-year delay into it? No, they did not. So we see this focus. We completed the major milestone events, which was the transfer of our technology from our labs into theirs. It's a high-risk situation. That's why they put most of the milestones around it. We said we would do it in 6 months, and we did. So I'm kind of a little bit proud that the teams worked incredibly well and are still friends, so that's not bad. And we do have a very clear working relationship with them that has been very focused, very successful, and most importantly for me, to time. Look out for the formal chit-chat on and RNS on the formal launch. But what have they been doing in preparation for that? And anybody that follows us on social media know that anything that doesn't rise to the level of an RNS, but if we can show a little bit of progress, we will. We did demonstrate this, that at the last conference, they were introducing this to the clinical community. It's what I call a soft launch. It is, in fact, to time. It was done very quickly, and now they're just rolling this out. So, for us, that this is very encouraging that on the commercial side, they are, very focused on the success of this test. What have we got to look forward to? We've got a small milestone which is driven by us. We expect to achieve that this year. Next year, we've got another milestone which is driven by volumes on their commercial launch. And they remain committed to that being a 2025 event. Direct sales, the product that we're doing ourselves. How's this been received by the clinical community? Way too much text on here, so I won't test you on these comments. But suffice to say, clinicians have recognized the need that this has been addressing, and are really quite enthusiastic about being able to be proactively. How can I look at the risk of my patient community so I can devote the right kind of resources and the right kind of time and the senior attention to the patients that are high risk? It's a very proactive story, and I'm very pleased to say that we are seeing traction in the marketplace, and we are looking towards that being stated revenues by the end of year. Third product, where are we with that? It's the longer term outcomes. It has to be in a study for longer. So that's why it's our third product to market. And the highlight and the headline here is it's on track to time. We expect to get the first analysis, the first iteration of the signature out of the validation in the first half of next year, and certainly that's of the right kind of timing for any potential partner. So that one is a big check under the on track. We do have programs that are in pipeline. Those are in various stages, and those are also on time. But those are the things that you might call medium, and even some of those being longer term opportunities. The research asset, or really our services bill, that was proven by the Thermo deal. We are able to announce some of the things that happen in that area. Quite often it's somebody's very private research pipeline, so they're not very keen on us publicizing or showing their hand. But when you come to do a collaboration with an academic advice institution, and this one was government funded, we were delighted to be able to do a joint press release, and that was in Australia. It's a very large project, government funded, multi-year. The idea is really to get all of the results of that into their standard of care. That would mean that we're part of that. So very excited and long-term internationally. And this is going to be a series of collaborations all at different stages. So when I look back and I try and look at a company and how we develop it, I always try and look at it from the investor point of view, and I say, okay, what really drives the value in a company such as ours? The most obvious thing and the starting point is, do you have a team that delivers? And are you hitting your milestones? So I can say if you look through the past 4 years, since IPO, we have done what we set out to do, and so we are recognised as having a very strong track record of delivery. What does that really translate into? In that time, we've got 2 tests out right into the clinic, which actually is at quite a fast pace. I'm quite proud of that. The team is fantastic, and their enthusiasm is sometimes very encouraging for us. De-risking. We have I've shown you the 3 ways that we look at the revenue. That diversification for me is about de-risking the company as much as you can. We're still only 19 people, and yet we've kind of got 3 avenues of commercialization and monetization. And so that sort of is attractive in terms of de-risking an opportunity. Obviously, you have to be in an environment where it's a large addressable market. There's some debate about whether it's 5 billion or 10 billion. I don't know. When we get into the billions, I say it's a large market. There's quite a lot that goes in behind that, showing the demonstration of that. But the companies that have gone before us are in the couple of 100 million range, and so there's plenty of opportunity. And then within healthcare, you always have to think, I'm in an environment that's quite structured. There is regulation and there's reimbursement. We launch in the US market first of all, and then you look internationally. Each one of them has its own, nuance. But we are at a very advanced stage. Regulatory, we're kind of very fully operational and able to be accredited under the new FDA oversight. So that was good news. And reimbursement. Well, we've got one last component to go in terms of the coverage. We've been able to go out there and order, and we have a code and a price, and the last element is expected at the end of the year. All in all, do you remember me saying right at the beginning, a kidney transplant company using RNA signature? We actually poised to be at the center of RNA. This is a new wave of technology. It is recognized as a very valuable and widely applicable technology across healthcare, and we are poised to be at the center of that new wave and the new generation of testing. Thank you.